The Chernobyl disaster is considered one of the most catastrophic nuclear accidents in history. It occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union. The accident caused a massive explosion and fire, which released significant amounts of radioactive material into the environment. This event had a severe impact on the lives of many people, animals, and the environment. This video will provide a detailed account of the full story of the Chernobyl disaster, including life before, how it happened, how it was brought to the world, and life after. Life before the Chernobyl disaster. Before the Chernobyl disaster, life in the city of Pripyat, Ukraine, was relatively peaceful. The city was founded in 1970 and was built to house workers for the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. At its peak, Pripyat had a population of approximately 50,000 people. It was considered a model city, with modern amenities such as a hospital, a cinema, and a stadium. However, despite its modern infrastructure, the city was relatively isolated from the rest of Ukraine, and residents were not allowed to leave without permission from the government. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was one of the largest nuclear power plants in the world, with 4 nuclear reactors. It was built in the 1970s to help meet the growing energy demands of the Soviet Union. The plant was located near the city of Pripyat and employed thousands of people. At the time, nuclear energy was seen as a clean and efficient source of power, and the plant was a source of pride for the Soviet Union. How the Chernobyl disaster happened. The Chernobyl disaster occurred on April 26, 1986, during a routine test at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The test was designed to simulate a power outage and was part of a routine maintenance program. However, during the test, the operators made a series of errors that resulted in a catastrophic explosion. The first mistake was made when the operators turned off the reactor's emergency cooling system, which is designed to prevent the reactor from overheating. This was done to simulate a power outage, but it left the reactor vulnerable to overheating. The second mistake was made when the operators attempted to re-engage the cooling system by inserting control rods into the reactor. Control rods are used to slow down or stop the nuclear reaction, but in this case, they caused the reactor to become even hotter. The third mistake was made when the operators attempted to remove the control rods from the reactor. They did this to increase the reactor's power output, but it caused the reactor to become even more unstable. The combination of these mistakes led to a massive explosion and fire at the plant, which released a large amount of radioactive material into the environment. The explosion was so powerful that it blew off the roof of the reactor building and scattered radioactive debris over a large area. The effects of the Chernobyl disaster. The Chernobyl disaster had a profound impact on the lives of people, animals, and the environment. The immediate effects of the disaster were felt by the plant workers and emergency responders, many of whom suffered from acute radiation sickness. The radiation released by the explosion was several times higher than the combined radiation from the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. In the days and weeks following the disaster, the Soviet government struggled to contain the spread of radioactive material. They attempted to seal off the area around the plant, but many people had already been exposed to high levels of radiation. The government also tried to downplay the severity of the disaster, which led to a lack of preparedness and confusion among the public. The immediate aftermath of the disaster saw a massive cleanup effort by workers, volunteers, and military personnel. They worked to contain the spread of radioactive material, remove contaminated debris, and decontaminate affected areas. The cleanup effort was dangerous and difficult, as workers had to contend with high levels of radiation and limited resources. The long-term effects of the disaster are still being felt today, more than 35 years later. The area around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant remains largely uninhabitable, with many towns and villages abandoned. The health effects of the disaster are still being studied, but it is estimated that thousands of people died or suffered from cancer and other radiation-related illnesses as a result of the disaster. How the Chernobyl disaster was brought to the world. The Soviet government initially attempted to downplay the severity of the disaster, which led to a lack of preparedness and confusion among the public. However, as the extent of the disaster became clear, the government was forced to acknowledge the severity of the situation. The disaster was first brought to the attention of the world by Sweden, which detected high levels of radiation in the atmosphere. The Swedish government demanded an explanation from the Soviet Union, which eventually admitted to the accident. The Chernobyl disaster had a significant impact on public perception of nuclear power and nuclear energy. It highlighted the dangers of nuclear accidents and raised concerns about the safety of nuclear power plants. The disaster also led to changes in the way nuclear power plants are designed and operated, with a greater emphasis on safety and risk management. Life after the Chernobyl disaster. The Chernobyl disaster had a profound and long-lasting impact on the lives of people in the affected areas. Many people lost their homes, their livelihoods, and their health as a result of the disaster. The area around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant remains largely uninhabitable, with many towns and villages abandoned. The disaster also had a significant impact on the economy of the region. The cleanup effort was expensive and required significant resources.